It's the Reconsider Simon podcast. Very happy to be with you today. We are tackling podcast 20. Lovely, nice round number, 20. And also going to be tackling two topics. One's going to be the mystical mountain portals of Catalan. Catalan's a very ancient land, so I'm going to be looking into that. And finally, going to be rounding off with, I recently released a video on YouTube to do with all about feeling energy and some of my experiences of how this new ability is basically developing and how I'm experimenting with it. So I'm going to play that after talking about mountains. So yeah, if you really prefer to sort of see all the visuals and the music that I've added to the video, then I guess check that out on YouTube or Rumble or BitChute. So let's get stuck in. Well, the power of mountains. I mean, recently I've had a lot of synchronicities to do with mountains and portal activity. This is the idea that portals enable you to access other realms or other energies coming into our reality or even potentially beings. And some people perceive them as being places of initiation. But one thing seems to be certain across all of them, that they're dealing with a lot of telluric earthly energy currents, which is potentially why some of these portals appear in these remote locations on top of mountains. But this idea of like portals specifically being in mountainous locations and terrain, can be found examples all over the world. But specifically for this podcast, I'm going to be looking into the area of Catalan. And again, this is a very ancient area with ancient peoples who are very fiercely protective of their culture. And they actually want to be an independent state in their own right. But yeah, particularly within Spain, Spain doesn't want to allow that. They want them to remain unified with Spain itself. So there's a lot of, it's similar to the debate with England and Scotland wanting to gain independence, a similar type of political stance. But it does appear, if you dig deep into Catalonian culture and the Catalan people, that there's a lot of sacred knowledge there and a lot of sacred locations that have held very dear to them. I don't know a huge amount about this culture. I've only done a little bit of cursory reading, little bits here and there, so I'm a bit of a novice to the whole aspect of it. One of the first Catalonian portals I'm going to be talking about revolves a very fascinating character, an English lady called Patrice Chaplin. I think she's around about 85 now. But if you read her bio, it's just amazing. It seems like she comes from a completely different era. And for the most part, she's an author and playwright, and is very well known, I think, for her writing of fiction. And she had a film made way back in the late 80s called Siesta. She was the writer for that. It involved Jodie Foster and other various kind of famous people that you would recognise. I've never heard of the film before. It seems quite esoteric, quite interesting, so I'm quite keen to check it out at some point. But there are two books that she wrote that are a bit more autobiographical. And the second one, which I think was released relatively recently, is called The Portal. And it's all to do with her initiation through various secret societies and other very kind of mystical figures into this portal. This portal specifically is found on the French side near the Spanish border and is deemed very sacred by the Catalonians. In this book, and across many interviews that I've seen on YouTube as well, she speaks about how this natural portal is located pretty much in the center between two towers that span two kind of towns. There's one called Rennes-le-Château, which I think is a kind of a mountain location. There's a kind of monastery there, I think, and a larger town called Girona, which is in Spain. Rennes-le-Château is in France and Girona is in Spain. But literally equidistance between the two locations. Each one has its own tower, hence that, being between two towers, and that's the actual central location for this portal on the top of a mountain. Patrice claims to be able to access this portal, but beforehand, you have to visit 11 other sacred sites before approaching this natural portal, and also prepare your body for 2 weeks, which I think involves kind of deep meditation. She had a guide through the entire process that people had already done this before. So you really have to be prepared quite significantly before accessing this portal. And it sounds like a bit of a shamanic experience in a way. Very, very wild story. I've never really heard anything like this before. But again, she's an incredibly fascinating individual. So that's the first portal in Catalonia. And then the second one is Mount Montserrat, which is outside of Barcelona. If you take the train, I think it's about an hour. I actually went there in 2017 and I was just struck how stunning the place was and the energies there as well. I've always vowed to go back someday. I still haven't quite made it there yet, but I would love to spend more time there because before I was going for a conference, I didn't really have too much time to really kind of explore the natural location. But if you read into Montserrat, the mountain of Montserrat, there's just a huge wealth of information to do with very, very strange activity around those mountains. So those are the two Catalonian portals I want to talk about. But as I mentioned, I also, towards the end, I want to play a newly released video. So some of you who maybe don't really check out my YouTube channel can check it out on the podcast itself. But it's all to do with my experiments feeling energy. But I suggest if you want the full audio-visual, Panovision, Dolby experience, then head again to YouTube, Rumble, or BitChute. You'll find the videos there. And I think just to brief summary about the video itself, last few years I've really been feeling energies, and it's become more and more pronounced, in terms of like being able to feel people, places, maps. It's really just come from the strangest of places, and it can be quite an esoteric concept in terms of the things, what's possible, what can you feel into. There are so many different aspects to it. So I spent quite a lot of time this year and sort of part of 2024 last year, just picking it apart and sort of delving deep into what's actually possible and sort of garnering information from it as well, which has been like really, really helpful. And I have been treading really, really carefully. I've made a few mistakes, and there are a few pitfalls that I've come across, definitely. But yeah, it's been quite profound, like what, the scope of what you can do, like, feeling into planets and feeling the energies. And it gets quite weird in the fact that I've started to have conversations with some of these energies as well. And yeah, there's a big argument, is that genuine? Is that my ego kind of playing tricks, or other beings misleading me? So, I'm not sort of completely sold on it. So I'm just treading very, very carefully. But the whole process has been very, very beautiful. So overall in the video audio, I just introduce the subject and just look at various topics and some of the things that I found out, some of the information or some of the aspects that I felt into. And some of it can be a little bit controversial, but, I really do recommend listening to it because it's been a really fascinating. I'm quite proud of the video itself as well. So yes, please do listen. Anyway, on to the first topic at hand. Mystical mountain portals of Catalan. Ooh. So yes, mountains, they're big and they're perceived a lot of the time to be very spiritual and across many cultures. And you can highlight definitely Tibet culture. I mean, the country is full of a lot of big mountains, and the locals within Tibet, particularly before China invaded, they would worship the mountains and actually would really work quite hard not to cause any harm to the mountains. They deemed them as being very, very sacred. And if they did have to excavate in some reason for building purposes or whatever reason, they would actually prepare before doing it. They prepared rituals just to, give the spirit of the mountain time to prepare for what they were about to do. Even now, from what I've read, a lot of Tibetans still feel that mountains have a deep, deep soul. It's very ingrained within the culture because it's a very mountainous region. And it's actually during the Chinese invasion when they actually started to exploit the land for its resources. They started digging for gold and mining in general. Many of the locals of Tibet actually perceived that some of the souls of the mountain, they perceived them as being mountain kings, actually left the area just due to the desecration of their natural environment. And it's not just Tibetan culture that perceives mountains as being very, very sacred places. You have yogis and masters across so many different Eastern philosophies from India and China and Korea. And there's this whole mythos of, people retreating to mountains to gain wisdom or gain enlightenment. And it's similar stories across all these different cultures. And there's the big question, what is happening? What is the mechanism? Is it purely down to solitude, or is it also a component of energy? You have megaliths, such as large stones and dolmens and monoliths. I spoke at length on this channel, and the idea that energy is spiraling up these rocks and then being transmitted out in various bands. Could this be happening on a mountain, on a larger scale? I've seen various YouTube videos of actually people stood on top of mountains, and just due to the electromagnetic forces of the mountain, these huge transmitters of energy, the hair's actually standing up on end. It's that charged. So obviously, visually, you can see there's a lot of energy swirling around. And certainly more symbolically, it's a profound link. It links the land to the sky. It's one of the closest points if you're stood on land, if you're stood on a mountain, to the heavens. So it gives you real perspective as a person, emotionally, spiritually, culturally. Mountains are very untamed, wild environments, and they really completely dwarf the human being. We haven't conquered those environments at all. The landscape humbles you if you're stood within these grand mountains that surround you. In contrast, you could be in the city, a very urban location. You could be stood on top of a very tall tower and just marvel at this urban expanse of this grid city. It always reminds me when I went to New York and stood at the Empire State Building, just this sheer mass of buildings and intensity. It was just quite awe-inspiring. But really, if you're stood on top of a mountain surrounded by mountainous area, it's even more humbling. It's just so much grander, more majestic than a cityscape, in my opinion. But let's not forget, mountains can be a very dangerous environment, especially if you get stuck up one and it's the wrong type of weather. There's countless examples of people getting lost and dying due to exposure to the elements. And even to travel through mountains, it's very tricky. It's very rocky terrain, so it's not easy to traverse those kind of environments. Although dangerous, mountains can also provide protection. If you live in an urban conurbation and there's mountains behind you, it gives you a certain amount of shelter. And then there's just an emotional presence of having hills in the background or mountains in the background on the horizon. It's very soothing for the soul. In the UK, have lots of churches and cathedrals that are built on top of hills and very much taking over the former power centres of these, what's loosely called the Celtic times. I'm reading about this at the moment, about how it's a really bad reference name for this very advanced culture potentially. And it's kind of like shifted aside and not really spoken about in mainstream historical academia. These churches and cathedrals across the United Kingdom, they're all placed on hills, have really just taken over these very sacred Celtic kind of power spots, and just harnessing the earth energies in their own way for Christian purposes, I guess. I think there are stories across the world of mountains and even just like quite low-lying sort of hills, stories of UFO activity, orbs, anomalous lights, cryptid beings, people disappearing. Sometimes people talk of openings up inside of mountains or mysterious cave systems underneath with entrances to inner earth or inner earth civilizations and inner earth tunnels, which could take you to other areas of the planet completely, along with conspiracies of underground bases in mountains, inhabited by the military, or even some mountains that are being cloaked, hiding bases for other non-human intelligences if you really want to get quite wild. So yeah, this is such a range of information to do with mountains and the strange activity that surrounds them. Personally, I've always just loved walking up mountains or hills. I've done it countless times around the world, and I found it always a mini pilgrimage in its own right. And I've had many sort of pseudo-spiritual experiences, because sometimes you can get in quite a tricky spot sometimes, can it be a little bit dangerous, and the fear starts to gather, and then you get through it and then eventually reach the summit, and then the elation and just the view is always spectacular. So yeah, big fan of walking up hills, and it's always a challenge. Now let's get into the meat of this subject to do with portals in mountainous regions. The first time I found out about Patrice Chaplin and the whole portal within that area was via the High Side Chats, and this is a podcast I'm subscribed to, headed up by Greg Carwood. And I noticed actually on his YouTube feed, there was a video clip from one of his podcasts, and his name's Mario Garza, and he's a research practitioner in symbolism. And they were briefly talking about Patrice and the idea of secret societies and these 11 gateways that you have to visit to be initiated before actually visiting this portal. And they were just talking about the Pyrenees Mountains, the mountains that border France and Spain, and how they act as a real physical divide between two cultures. But the Pyrenees Mountains overall is a very mystical place with a lot of kind of strangers goes on around there. So that's how I briefly came across Patrice Chaplin through those guys. And I've only really done a little bit of cursory research on her. Again, I'm quite excited about her as an individual, so I'm quite keen to read one of her books, her more autobiographical books. It looks fascinating, but I thought it might just be easier to read one of her bios that I found on the internet. Patrice Chaplin is an internationally renowned playwright and author and has published more than 27 books, plays, and short stories. Her most notable work includes Albany Park, Siesta, which was made into a film starring Jodie Foster and Isabella Rossellini, Into the Darkness Laughing, Hidden Star, Night Fishing, and Death Trap. As a bohemian in Paris during the 1950s and 60s, she spent time with Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir, married to Charlie Chaplin's son, Michael, and living and working in Hollywood. She was friends with everyone from Lauren Bacall and Miles Davis to Salvador Dali and Jean Cocteau, if I said that correctly, who gave her a starring role in one of his films. In her book City of Secrets 2007, The Portal 2010, and The Stone Cradle 2015, Chaplin opens the door to entirely new and compelling elements to the René Le Chateau mystery, the Spanish connection, namely the Catalan capital of Girona. Chaplin has contributed to collections of short stories including Black Valentine and the Minerva Book of Short Stories 1. Her plays, documentaries, and short stories have been extensively written and adapted for radio. The short story Night in Paris has been translated into many countries, and other short stories of hers have appeared in magazines and newspapers, including The Independent. Her stage play, From the Balcony, was commissioned by the National Theatre in London in conjunction with Radio 3 and was performed at the Cotslow Theatre. She has also written articles for publications including The Guardian, The Sunday Times, The Jewish Chronicle, The Daily Mail, Marie Claire, and The London Magazine. Today, Chaplin finds herself thrown deep into the Grail culture and at the heart of the raging new controversy about the reality of the René Le Chateau mystery. Chaplin is also the director of The Bridge, a non-profit organisation that leads workshops based in the performing arts as a new and unique way to help fight addiction. She resides in London and is currently writing The Garden of the Frenchwoman. For me, that's quite a bio, and she's really been actively involved, I guess, what you would perceive as maybe the glory days of Hollywood, and she's mixed in some very sort of famous bohemian circles and quite well-known cultural figures. I guess most of us here listening to this podcast, obviously maybe not the wider society, but there's a real use of hidden knowledge in the occult, especially within the entertainment industry and film and music and art. So Chaplin really seems to straddle both of these worlds about the occult and be quite open about it, but then also just creating output for film, television, theatrical plays, so very much has a foot within the mainstream as well. It appears her journey as an initiate happened and started after encountering various important figures that seem to be involved in these shadowy secret societies. And a couple of her books are autobiographical. There's one called The City of Secrets, which is all about her visit to the ancient city of Girona, which is in Spain and is part of the ancient lands of Catalan. And it seems to involve the meeting of various influential people. And I guess these were really different times when she was young. I think she was only 15 when she actually went to Girona and met various individuals. And I think actually got into romantic relationships with quite a pivotal figure that helped her become an initiate. And then the second book, The Portal, is all about her experiences with the 11 sacred sites and I guess preparing herself for this visitation to this ancient portal on top of a mountain. But all of these ideas of spiritual initiation with this portal all comes from the Kabbalistic sort of traditions. It's something I'm not really that kind of aware of and actually a little bit fearful of, I guess, maybe have some negative connotations if I'm being honest towards that. But yeah, some of these belief systems apparently go way back to like the Middle Ages. And again, bringing it sort of forward to the kind of the glitterati of like Hollywood and the art world. Salvador Dali was a member of this secret society, an author called Umberto Eco, and also the filmmaker Jean Cocteau. Hopefully I said that right. They were all initiates within this secret society. So again, just highlighting some of these really prominent figures that kind of really delving deep into these occult areas of knowledge. So like I mentioned, there was 2 weeks of heavy preparation, heavy meditation, along with visiting these 11 sacred sites. I don't quite know why that would be, but they all span areas of Spain and France, some of these ancient areas. So there's a lot of work in preparation leading up to kind of visiting this portal. You need to be the exact resonance to be able to, gel and kind of interact with these energies. And many people won't be able to interact, and they won't even be able to see it because they don't have the right energetic signature, because they haven't done the work essentially. Next, I want to read an extract from the very book, The Portal, which discusses the entire initiation and the experience itself. And it goes like this. The portal is on the summit of Mount Canigal, equidistant from Girona and Rennes-le-Château. Those who know its legendary existence do not question or go near it. My guide was clear about its dangerous exclusivity. She said it led to other layers of existence beyond time as we know it. You could not approach its aperture alone. Some did. They did not come back. Joseph was one who showed no fear. It was another part of existence. We didn't know it all. Miss you. There you go. That's an extract from her book. Patrice's idea of a portal, which is pretty standard, I guess, is the gap in the Earth's atmosphere, and the whole idea of it connecting to other realms and allowing material and even beings, other intelligences, to kind of come into our reality. And she claims that there's an understanding probably within secret societies and this glitterati that portals apparently appear in clusters, so they can be grouped together in various areas of the planet. Mount Canigal has a strong spiritual and metaphysical presence. And like I mentioned earlier, it's a very sacred place deemed by the Catalonians. And many wouldn't actually dream walking up the mountains themselves. They perceive it as being that sacred. I guess it's similar to the Aboriginals in Australia, where you have Uluru, which used to be called Ayers Rock. It's considered a very sacred rock, and they would refrain from actually walking up the rock itself. Rennes-le-Château in France is perceived as being a very mystical place with deep hidden knowledge, and very much ties into, like I mentioned, the whole Twin Towers symbology. So there's one tower in Rennes-le-Château and one in Girona. And the whole Twin Tower symbolism is everywhere within culture in terms of conspiracies and esoteric knowledge. And interestingly, it all really relates to Kabbalah and followers of Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, which apparently stretch as far back as the medieval times. And also in relation to this portal, there exists potentially within Rennes-le-Château of hidden esoteric writing, which basically documents a lot of people's visitation experiences within the portal. So it appears that many people have been in this portal, and it appears there are documents somewhere detailing that, but obviously they're hidden from the public. According to Patrice and her understanding and knowledge on the portal and her own personal experience, is it actually really changes a person quite deeply. And some find they're not actually in resonance at all, which is why you need to do a lot of preparation beforehand. And then the people who aren't in resonance sometimes just don't come back. So the whole journey is very, very unpredictable. But she claims that people may witness, glimpses of past events and can come out very enlightened as an individual by going through deeply painful experiences and being confronted with deeply painful experiences and memories. And it can tie into the whole idea of past lives and deep insights into the self. And again, sort of the mechanics of it, she claims it's really the etheric body separating from the physical. And this is what enters the actual portal itself. And it's quite close to a near-death experience. And some people who are really prepared and really in resonance with the whole portal come back with very influential powers and are able to materially manifest in the physical world quite powerfully. So I think this really gets to the aspect of the portal, why it's so sought after and why it's so secret. Because I guess some people are like, yeah, maybe you come out and you're more healed and you're more balanced person, but obviously elites and people in power, influential people, they're after special powers. They're after, influence in how being able to manifest in the, 3D environment. And so once you achieve this, then you're, in a high initiate and you're able to control your whole experience. And this kind of gets to the nub of like how people are able really to sort then construct their own reality and become rich and gain more power through utilizing this portal in some way. in an interview I saw on YouTube when she was discussing this whole experience quite briefly. When she actually went to the portal, she was really surprised that she was greeted by a guide in the spirit realm who turned out to be an old professor of history who used to teach at Cambridge University, and obviously had died a long time ago. But he was actually there to kind of guide her through this whole experience. Plus, the whole experience involves a real time distortion. Like you can feel like you've been away for a very, very long time and had a real quite long experience, lengthy experience. But in reality, in our time, it's only just been a few minutes. And she relates a lot of people kind of come out with grace. There's like a real power to the experience and understanding, a complete increase in your perspective on life and the reality around you. And she says the whole memory of it is very, very interesting in itself. It's intrinsically imprinted on you, like you'll never ever forget. Now, I've been practicing this name ad nauseum after finding how to pronounce it on YouTube, so hopefully it goes well. But Bernier Saulnier, Patrice describes being a very strangely wealthy priest, which is quite unheard of, obviously, because the priest class, tended to have all their resources given to them by the church. So he had all this like humongous amount of wealth behind him, which is very strange. And he was based at René Le Chateau. And then she claims actually that his wealth and powers actually came from the portal. Overall, the people that knew about the portal and around the mountain of Canigo tried to keep the whole situation completely secret. But it was obviously being misused by secret societies and other people from high society. There's also a lot of claims surrounding kind of the Nazis. Obviously, they were doing their Indiana Jones thing where they were trying to collect all these metaphysical like trophies and hidden knowledge from around the world. And that included Hitler going to this portal, Himmler, and also Goring. Is that Goring? Yeah, anyway, all the Nazis, all the big ones, the big hitters of that party, they're all traveling to this portal. So who knows, potentially whether they entered into this portal and had like a shamanic experience, or maybe they were given special powers. I have no idea. Obviously, it didn't go too well for them in the end. But there is actually another side to the conversation where the Nazis actually really won. Because of the whole thing, they just end up infiltrating the United States and were put in positions of power throughout government and things like NASA. So there is that whole that concept as well that actually they won kind of secretly in a weird way. Anyway, that's another story for another day. But there's even Howard Hughes, that American industrialist. And the only reason I know about him is that a lot of my knowledge from pop culture, but Leo DiCaprio plays Howard Hughes. I think it's called The Aviator, I think. And for people who don't know, he's basically an American who was incredibly wealthy and just spent a hell of a lot of money perfecting aviation and planes. And he wasted a lot of money, a lot of big follies, humongous planes that were never practical, and spent, huge amounts of wealth in doing it. And was also quite into being a film director as well. And again, spent a humongous amount of money developing one particular film. And so he's an interesting character, but there's a lot of connections, according to Patrice, that actually Howard Hughes went through his portal. So that would make sense how he had just insane levels of money, because he basically gathered it from this powerful experience from the portal. So all these people we're talking about here, these are all like figures and characters from the past, from World War II, and Howard Hughes is kind of, around that time as well, slightly before, I think, probably. So yeah, I mean, the big question is this thing still being used? Is it still being harnessed? Are like incredibly wealthy people or people from secret societies using this power? So yeah, there's a big question in terms of like some of the people we know in high society now and political circles and kind of corporations and stuff, like how much of this power is being granted from portals like this. I mean, maybe it's not this particular one in the Catalan area. Maybe there are others around the world that have been harnessing this power, and it's been a big part of my work recently, just kind of really understanding like how much these earth energies have been harnessed for so long by these kind of rich and powerful people to basically shape reality in their own image. And obviously kind of normal people, I just don't have a clue what's going on, and they don't realize how much they're being played and how much the earth energies and the general manifestation of our reality has been is being meddled with in such impressive, complex ways that a lot of people just don't understand. I'm really coming to that realization now. But obviously, the portal and the understanding and this hidden knowledge and insights into this power like goes way, way back. And according to Patrice, there was like multiple Kabbalists. So yeah, we kind of Jewish mysticism. There was a load of them that lived in Girona, I think around about the 12th century, and they all lived near each other and they used the portal frequently. And some of them actually didn't return for experimentation in going into this portal multiple times. And apparently, according to her, again, there's one rabbi who wrote a poem about his experiences, and it's called The Nut Garden, and it's by a guy called Joseph. Now, this is going to be a difficult one to pronounce. Git Attila, I think. Git Attila? Something like that, anyway. But yeah, he's one of the sort of rabbis that had experiences and wrote about his. I think it was originally written in Hebrew, but the English version has been apparently translated by Peter Cole. This is what I found on the internet, so I hope this is correct. So I'm about to read you this poem now. The nut garden holds things felt and thought, and feeling for thought is always a palace. Sinai with flames of fire about it, burning through, never by fire devoured. On all four sides surrounded so, entrance is barred to pretenders forever. For one who learns to be wise, however, its doors are open toward the east. He reaches out and takes a nut, then cracks its shell and eats. So there you go, that's the Nut Garden poem. Yeah, and it does seem to be a few lines there that do really relate quite heavily to the potential experience of being in that portal. So yeah, quite an interesting little poem there. Overall, the Pyrenees Mountains, particularly Rennes-Chateau, is like heavily steeped in Catholicism, especially that Berninier, Soninier, I hope I said that right. He's a Catholic priest. So obviously, it's a lot of this power from this portal is deemed deeply forbidden because these powers are not granted by God. So I guess they would perceive this as being kind of satanic or demonic or whatever. So yeah, it's just an interesting kind of contrast where it's kind of these areas are deeply entrenched in Catholicism, but obviously you have this very kind of powerful earth energies kind of around that area as well. But yeah, going back to Patrice, again, I mean, she mentioned it goes back as far as kind of medieval period in terms of like Kabbalah and people involved in that sort of Jewish mysticism, kind of understanding what was going on and experimenting with it. But she also illustrates that maybe it stretches way beyond there, even as far as like ancient Samaria. So yeah, who knows how far back this portal goes and how many times it's been used by various people in positions of power, etc. I mean, yeah, this is kind of Sumerian like culture is sort of generally is accepted, within kind of mainstream academia and most people, but there's also that kind of indication maybe that portal goes back even further. Like if you're talking about ancient sort of forbidden civilizations, which majority of the people would just perceive as being a conspiracy theory. But obviously people like me and you are listening to this would sort of give credence to the idea of things of like Atlantis. So, is there a possibility that it stretches, far, far back into kind of really ancient civilizations to civilizations that aren't accepted by the mainstream? And again, according to Patrice, the ancient mapmaker Cassini had identified like other portals around the world. So as well as kind of generally kind of mapping the world and understanding, a modern understanding of maps that we have today, he was also obviously kind of working in very esoteric ways and identifying these really powerful spots around the world. So yeah, that would be fascinating if there was a map that kind of contained some of these secret portals. That would be amazing to have a look at. So yes, that's kind of the end of the little chat to do with the portal in Canago and sort of Catalan and Patrice Chaplin's story. But yeah, the whole thing I just find like incredibly fascinating, and just her as a character is just deeply interesting. So yeah, I think at some point I really would like to read her book, The Portal, and just understand actually some of the experiences she had. But it does really build a big picture that we all kind of know about. It's becoming more and more evident that, you have high society and these really wealthy individuals or famous people, and they are really just being helped by some of this kind of hidden occult knowledge, particularly these earth-based portal technologies and kind of the upper levels of societies are maybe more of a, particularly within Masonic and all these various secret societies, and there's probably so many different types of secret societies around the world, but there's a real deep understanding of the Earth's energetics and how it kind of interacts with the astrology of everything as well, and using it and working and harness it to favor themselves and to gain power. So I just think this is just one element of probably a whole litany of his stories like this. That's just a really good, credible evidence to kind of show that, that very, very powerful people just know about so many things to do with these technologies and harnessing it again for their own worth, for their own use to sort of dominate society and the rest of the world, which isn't very nice, is it? No. So that's kind of like the northern, I guess that the whole portal is really the northern areas of like ancient sort of Catalonia, Catalan, whatever you call it. But we're now going to move a little bit towards Barcelona and sort of the mountain of Montserrat. And that I visited Barcelona like many years, well, no, not yet. Yeah, I would guess it was quite a few years ago now. It was like 2017. And I went to the UFO World Congress. I just went through a stage of going to loads of these conferences all over the world, just sort of connecting with people and just fascinating just because, in my normal everyday life, the people surrounding me, just no one was into this sort of stuff. And I think it's really good going to these sort of conferences because it's just nice to be surrounded by people who kind of think like you, talk like you and stuff. So yeah, it's just nice to be in that kind of environment. And Montserrat Mountain was a huge revelation. And I'd actually been to like Barcelona many, many years before, just going far back. This is before I went to, this is going to be a personal anecdote now. So you better strap in. But yeah, before going to university in Brighton, I sort of finished my A-levels, which is kind of like, if you're not in the UK, that's like final couple of years of school. And then I decided to go to art college for a year called Art Foundation. And you basically just do loads of different art disciplines and you sort of specialize so you can kind of create a portfolio. So then you can sort of choose a particular university degree you want to do. So you do loads of stuff from like fashion to like 3D and graphics and video and fine art. And then you sort of discover what you like and then create a portfolio surrounding that kind of discipline. But while I was doing that foundation, there was 2 study trips. And one was going to New York. I think it was for about a week, maybe less. And another one was to Barcelona. And everyone obviously wanted to go to New York. So I applied for that, but didn't get in because it was too many people. And so, yeah, I was kind of one of the rejects who got sent to Barcelona instead of my second choice. And it was a very different time. I guess talking about this now, it sounds a bit weird. But I remember, because obviously in New York, America, the drinking age is like 21 years old. And a lot of people who were going on this study trip were probably about 18, 19, some are actually 17 and 16, I would say. Some of the art lecturers are just quite crazy people, and they made fake IDs for everyone who were going to New York just because they said they didn't want to be stuck in a hotel sort of babysitting. They wanted to go out and have fun and have a drink. So it meant they had to create fake IDs for everyone to sort of convince people working at bars they're all 21, which I think is kind of crazy that an education establishment would do that. But yeah, again, I guess it's a kind of a different time. But it's strange because all of these study trips that I've done, like through art college or just like university, have just been wild, and just I have fond memories, but they were just quite crazy. A lot of crazy stuff tended to happen. They're quite hedonistic in terms of a lot of alcohol, basically. So yeah, I traveled to Barcelona back in the late 90s, and I came from not small town, medium-sized town called Chester, where a lot of the clubs kind of closed at 2:00, and so Barcelona was the real first sort of big city I went to where they had these clubs that opened till 5:00 in the morning. And we all went to various like bars beforehand and ended up in this club, very cheesy club. It had sort of dancers on podiums and stuff. And that went on till like 5:00 in the morning. I remember sort of someone asking me the time, and they were like, "Oh, it's like 4:30." And I was like, "No way. You better get back to the hotel," because all the lecturers are like, "No, you go out and have fun, but whatever happens, you're getting up in the morning. You're not staying in bed." So we all got back to the hotel for about 5:00 in the morning, and then some of the lecturers stood in the hallway, incredibly cross, and just ticking us off as we came in. Just we were completely obliterated, very, very drunk. And so, yeah, I probably got like about 2, 3 hours sleep until I had to sort of get up in the morning, and I felt absolutely horrendous. I was so sick and so hungover. And yeah, but one of the lecturers came in, made me get out of bed, and it's just like I was walking around Barcelona just being sick everywhere. I just remember that, going to all these like tourist spots. So yeah, I was a very, very naughty boy. And but yeah, back then, like Barcelona was just really, really wild, because I remember it was just a mad mixture of just like, by day it was okay, but nighttime there was just lots of drug dealers, and there was lots of kind of violence and lots of prostitutes everywhere. I'd never been anywhere like that, and I was probably about 18 at the time, so it was a real eye opener, because obviously you didn't get anything like that kind of where I lived at all. So yeah, it was a bit hairy, and some of the younger girls went out on the second night and they were wearing what they would wear in Chester, which is, if you know anything about northern sort of towns and cities, a lot of the girls wear next to nothing in terms of like going out. And so they were doing the same thing in Barcelona. Everyone was like, don't go out like that, you're stupid. And then what happened? They got into trouble. They went back to some random Spanish guy's house and they got freaked out and nearly got attacked. And then girls rang their parents, tell them what happened. And then the parents then ran the college, and then the college then had to move everyone out. It's like right in the center of Barcelona near, I think it's a whole area, I can't remember the name of it. There's just loads of alleyways and stuff. And by day it's nice, but by night it got very, very quite dark and quite scary. So he had to move us quite far out of Barcelona, and the college had to sort of pay for it. So yeah, well done, girls. But yeah, just the whole thing was just a wild, wild time. And I just remember being in this bar, I think it was like the second or third night, and there was just, as people were leaving, there was a guy outside sort of systematically mugging them with a knife. So yeah, it's just crazy, crazy days. Anyway, I digress. I don't know why I started that mad story, but it's now documented for the internet and the rest of time. Yeah, where am I? So yes, Montserrat, I remember. So returning back to Barcelona many, many, many years later, 2017, I'd sort of stayed in a cheap hotel. I think it was probably about an hour away. And it's just a very interesting time when I was at it there. I think this is another personal anecdote, but it's very kind of prescient to that area and the history of like Catalan and Catalonia. And I came there at a very fascinating time where I think, because there's a Catalonian aspect to kind of Barcelona where they don't speak Spanish, they speak kind of Catalan. They're fiercely like proud of that. And some of them, or maybe a lot of them, I don't quite know the sort of statistics, want Catalonia to be its own sort of federal state again, so move away from Spain. And I guess obviously the Spanish government don't want that to happen. And there was some huge controversy at the time where a lot of Catalonian leaders were actually kind of arrested and they were put in prison. And so I was sort of staying in this hotel, and it was a little bit of a town sort of centre. I think it was like a suburb that had its own little town centre and restaurants and stuff. It was quite nice. But there was a lot of residential kind of apartments sort of everywhere. And so there was a huge load of protest going on to do. I remember like as you came out of the train station, there was a kind of small town square there, and there was just loads of people with placards there all the time, just like protesting what the Spanish government had done. And then one evening, I think I was in my hotel room, and just suddenly I just heard this huge range of like banging, sort of cluttery, sort of metal sounds coming from outside. And I looked outside and I realized the whole neighborhood, people in their apartments had got metal pans out and knives and forks and various cutlery, and they're just banging them together. So the whole neighborhood just erupted in people like banging on their cookware and cutlery, in protest to this sort of Catalonian like arrest that occurred. So yeah, it was an interesting time for me to be there. And going back when I was there, like this is the second time I went to Barcelona was completely different. It completely cleared up, a lot of that, especially in the evening sort of presence. I'm sure it's still there to a degree, but I didn't see that much evidence of like prostitution or drug dealers. It felt loads more safer, because I remember going, late 90s, and it was pretty hairy. It's quite wild. But yeah, so I was kind of staying there, and then I got the train from this hotel. It's probably about an hour away to get to the Mount Montserrat by train. And when I arrived there, I was just struck like how amazing these kind of mountain formations were. And it's one thing that I have actually really noticed around the world. There's a particular characteristic to some of these rock formations that does seem to lend itself to being energetically really, really powerful. And some of the characteristics I've noticed that kind of that inform that is this strange kind of blancmange mold shape. And I don't know, I guess you get blancmanges obviously in France and the UK, but for other people, I would say it's like a jelly mold. I can't remember what the American word for jelly is now. Jello, isn't it? Yeah. They're very sort of blobby. And they tend the rocks, so it has that kind of shape and form like a mold, like a blancmange mold, a jelly mold, whatever your language is. And the rocks also tend to be quite light in shade, they're quite light, and it has a kind of sparkliness to it. So I guess it has a certain amount of quartz in it as well. And I've just found that there's so many locations with that sort of level of typography, that level of stone, that level of geology. It just lends itself to being quite spiritual and also just very, very energetic and just a very nice energy. You know, I've seen it when you go to places in America, when I went to Joshua Tree in California, sort of similar sort of rocks around there. Again, very, very powerful. There's a lot of mystical stuff goes around that area, obviously. And then when I did this whole like tour around Africa for 2 months, I went to Namibia, and there was one particular area in Namibia which used to be a former German colony, so it's sort of down south of Africa, quite close to sort of South Africa. It's the next country before you go to South Africa, which is kind of the end of my trip. I think the place is called Switzkoppe, and it was just overland tour that we did. So we all went there and sort of camped at these amazing, again, sort of blancmange mold, jelly mold rocks there. And I've got these really great photos of me sort of stood on the top of the rocks, and there's just an energy about that place. I just remember just like leaving. This is way before I got even spiritual. I just remember just sort of saying to people, yeah, there's a real energy about that place. It's a really special place to be. So I'm just sort of seeing similar places like that all over the world, like similar to Montserrat. And there's even like, I go to the Isle of Mull quite a bit, and especially the south of the island, they've got similar kind of rocks, quite more blancmange. They've got more kind of a marble effect to the stones. It's like more pinkish, but again, they're sort of quite light. But to the south of the island in the Isle of Mull, I just find it quite spiritual, and that sort of then bridges to Iona, which is supposed to be where Christianity first came to the UK. So there's a lot of very interesting energies around the area, and I think a lot of it lends to the geology. But yeah, in terms of Montserrat, so it's already like the shape and form gives me an indication that it's going to be a special area because I've like had experiences already. But overall, in terms of some stats, some information, you have of the mountains themselves. It's quite, you arrive at the station, the kind of main station, and the mountain's just like there. So it's kind of quite flat around, and then suddenly you just have these massive mountains, which is again for me is quite energetic. So when it's like, you know, a lot of the air around it's quite flat, and then suddenly you just have this kind of collection of like very, very tall mountains. I think it's quite energetic as well. I would say like sort of feminine flat land around, and then very masculine kind of land kind of next to it. There's a real contrast. It tends to make the area quite energetic, again, personally. But yeah, overall, it's 1,300 meters high. And I don't know what that is, old money in inches and feet or whatever. But yeah, it's quite high. And I vaguely remember going up a train, but I think maybe there was also a cable car, or maybe I did go up a cable car. I can't quite remember. But you have to take a special like carriage, whatever it was, of a train or a cable car, up to the top. And at the very top, there's a Benedictine monastery called the Santa Maria de Montserrat. And there's also other things there. There's like a hotel, and there's a conference center, which is where this UFO conference was being held. And yeah, overall, I didn't really get that much chance to kind of explore beyond that area because I was at the conference. Like I think it's about 2 or 3 days. But yeah, the conference was really great. So there were loads of hiking trails that went off, and you could walk off for quite a long time. But again, because I was convening with weird and wonderful cosmic information, I didn't get a chance to kind of go and explore. And I know that if you do go hiking, there are sort of tiny monasteries, what they call hermitages. You can walk to, and I think there's a very famous sort of cave network underneath as well, which is another aspect that makes this place quite spiritual and quite special. But apart from the overall stunning location, it was very, very nice. I read before I went there about just the huge amount of very unexplained, strange activities that occur around there, which is obviously not surprising, just due to the information, the characteristics and the mountains I already talked about. But yeah, you could find things like UFOs and just strange orbs. Another big aspect of Montserrat is just the countless disappearances of people. There's a lot of strange stories. And weirdly, I remember like researching this back in 2017. I found it a lot easier to find like strange information on Montserrat and disappearances. Now it's strange. It's very, very hard. And I had to go back some of my old notes from 2017 and use the Wayback Machine to sort of find various links that I had before. Because, you know, some of the websites just weren't working, and just, yeah, it just kind of plays into that whole dead internet theory where, you know, the internet's become more and more controlled and it's harder to find sort of more esoteric information. It's quite hard. And I would definitely very much agree with that. But yeah, in terms of like some of the big aspects to the Montserrat sort of story is that you have this Benedictine monastery right on the top. And in this monastery, which is specifically built to house this thing called the Black Madonna, which is a dark skinned Virgin Mary statue carrying a baby Jesus. And there's a whole legend that kind of surrounds this statue. And the dark colour of the skin is due to the fact that I think it's the wood that it's made out of, and it's darkened over time. But some people also point towards the fact that that's the real colour of the Virgin Mary and Jesus, etc. Anyway, but the legend goes that back in 808, there's two different versions to this. It's either 880 or 888, you know, BC. Some various shepherds, they're on top of the mountain, they see these bright lights, and they're hearing these very angelic singing coming from this cave mountain. And so they decide to go investigate what's going on. And at this point, they actually find the Virgin Mary, this Black Madonna inside the cave itself. And so they try to kind of pick up the statue, trying to move it, but it became impossibly heavy. They weren't able to take it off the mountain at all. So the story goes, they built a chapel on the location where they found this Black Madonna, specifically because it couldn't be moved anywhere else. And so this is kind of the main aspect of this church. I did go inside it, and it was a beautiful church, and I'd sort of convened with the Black Madonna as well. There's got a perspex glass box around it, and there's a little kind of incision where I think you can kind of put your hand in to sort of touch the hand of Jesus or the Virgin Mary, so you can kind of interact with it a little bit without it being damaged. And there's a whole litany of like stories to do with this statue and like and miracles and healings, I guess, and it has a real kind of presence to it. So that's one fascinating aspect to the Montserrat story. But looking more at this sort of geomancy aspect to the area, I mean, this rock formations, these like very big sort of rock needle-like shapes, and a lot of people say that these, because you have the mountain, it's very, very tall, just suddenly very, very tall, which you have to get a cable car to the top, and it has these very sort of big needle-shaped antennas on the top. And people propose that actually they act like antennas and they emit a particular frequency of geobiological magnetism. And then coupled with the subterranean caverns and caves underneath, some claim there's also a huge like underground lake, huge underground water. And that in combination with like the lake and the cave system and also the stones and the formation of the stones kind of creates this very, very special energy. And it's sort of the environmental ionization that I read somewhere. So yeah, because of this, a lot of esoteric groups go there and they're performing rituals again, like similar to the portal, where they're trying to harness the magnetic forces in some way. And yeah, maybe some of them are doing it for good, but I guess also a lot of people are, using it for kind of nefarious, like powerful purposes, which is a real shame. But just due to the amount of strange activity and strange like energies around there are a lot of people that say there are interdimensional doors and portals around the area, and this kind of ties into, apparently it's just like regularly people go missing on that mountain. I mean, you can search now, and I think there was even like a recent story where like a very famous fashion kind of owner, I think it's like Zara, I think it is, and he just randomly suddenly died and just fell off. And there are lots of stories to do with people disappearing completely or just dying in very, very strange ways. And you'll just find there's like constant stories to do with that. And this is one of the aspects that was actually quite hard. Like some of the stories I originally went in 2017 are really hard to find now. I couldn't find some of these stories. So I had to sort of really kind of go back. But it just feels like maybe officially they're trying to keep a lid on this, because some information I did read that the locals know that at least one person goes missing every week. But that's why, I don't know if that's completely true or not, but that's just one aspect of what I was reading on someone's website. But yeah, if you go on the internet, no one would say that. So maybe there is a certain level that officialdom somewhere that tries to keep a lid on of like what's going on in this particular area. And I think it's like because of these energies, like visitors who go there can really consciously or unconsciously be affected by those, that land itself and the energies it's emitting. And there's just some stories that kind of tie into people going missing or just having strange behavior. And in 1980, there was a man known as N. Yorba, I think his name is. He was a rack railway worker from Montserrat, and he vanished along with his dog, and they were never ever seen again. And a lot of these kind of big stories tended to happen, seems to be like the 80s and 90s that I've got. And I'm sure there are more now, but maybe they sort of try and keep them a bit more secret these days. And there's another one in 1980. This is an interesting year, obviously, because I've spoken a lot about that due to the Rendlesham Forest and other aspects of the UK and sort of UFO visitation. So 1980 is an interesting year, particularly because I was born. But yeah, so 1980, which is like 1 month later, apparently, from this rail track worker, an 18-year-old girl named Gloria from Olesa de Montserrat disappeared, and she was found wandering in the forest days later. And then after being rescued, she escaped again into the woods and was never seen again. So yeah, it's just strange. Obviously, this girl just feels like her consciousness in some ways been interfered with. She had some kind of like strange interaction with the energies, and it's just, yeah, for whatever reason, she's disappeared into maybe a portal, maybe, I don't know, who knows. But yeah, moving forward, 1985, I'm really going to butcher all these names, sorry. Amparo Vielda Hug, I don't know, a hiker reportedly feeling dizzy near the deep crevices and claimed she was mysteriously drawn toward the underground realm of the mountain, and days later she disappeared and only her car was found. So yeah, another aspect to this interaction with these energies and the mind and people being drawn to this place and then disappearing down the caves or just disappearing altogether, and people don't know exactly where they've gone. Moving forward a little bit, 1990, there was a journalist called Carlos Teuxtor, and he fled his home, was later found heading toward Montserrat. The next day he disappeared again and was found dead 3 weeks later near the Holy Cave. So obviously there's an area called the Holy Cave there. So yeah, more strangeness. 1998, there was a car of a missing businessman who was found abandoned at the monastery Esplanade. During a search, rescuers found a lost man signaling to a helicopter. After being rescued, he claimed he'd been sleeping next to the Black Woman. When the rescue team searched the area, they discovered the mummified body of a woman who had disappeared 3 years earlier. So yeah, very weird. There's a lot of strangeness going around there. So that's all the accounts of people disappearing. Overall, in terms of other strange activities, UFOs, strange lights in the sky, which is a big aspect is sometimes to do with hills and mountains across the world. And this spans, decades, even centuries. You have like people talking about this. Obviously, maybe sort of centuries ago, it would have more of a religious aspect to it. People would perceive them as being like angels, and that's probably why, there's a monastery at the top there. But now I think it still happens. But I remember watching like a strange little BBC clip, sort of made quite a few years ago. But there's a regular UFO group that meets there, and they do sky watching, and people see UFOs and stuff. And there's been claims that people being abducted from this mountain as well. So yeah, there's still a lot of regular activity with UFOs, I assume, around that area. And then, yeah, going back to more kind of ancient aspects, Grail mythology, the whole idea of Jesus Christ and the Holy Grail. I've spoken about it quite a lot to do with Glastonbury and some of the King Arthur legends, and all kind of ties into this area as well, because apparently there's legends during the Crusades. And you have the location of the chalice near the Pyrenees. And yeah, there was part of the legend was about the Crusades that you had the location of the chalice near the Pyrenees, and it was called Mount Salvat. But many believe that actually the mountain wasn't in the Pyrenees, but actually is Montserrat. So there's a lot of legends and talk about the chalice, the Holy Grail being at Montserrat. And again, going back to the Nazis, and the Nazis became very interested. And so Himmler, Hitler's right-hand man or left-hand man, one of his sort of cohorts anyway, visited Barcelona and Montserrat in 1940. This is the very start, I guess, of like World War II, and was specifically looking for the Grail. And there's a lot of indications to say that the monks found him very, very unpleasant. He wasn't a very nice man, but he was allowed to stay for a few days, and he spent many, many days in the library just trying to track down any information to do with the Holy Grail in that mountain location. And he was particularly, this is a fascinating aspect of the story, trying to uncover information to do with King Arthur and Knight Percival, who I think is the main knight to sort of find the Grail. So yeah, fascinating. Obviously, the Nazis are there as well. So that concludes the Montserrat story. In fact, it concludes the whole conversation to do with mountains and portals. I was actually going to be like try and look at a few way more locations around the world, but I realised actually, the Montserrat story and the one to do with Patrice Chaplin, there was just so much information about that probably fill about an hour, which it kind of has, looking at the sort of timestamp now. So I just kind of decided to limit it to 2 experiences. But yeah, overall, just really fascinated by the story, particularly the Patricia one. I think I keep calling her name wrong. I think I'll be calling her Patricia. Oh my God. Okay, well, obviously I've been getting the lady's name wrong the entire podcast. Patricia, not Patrice. I was trying to think, because I couldn't think whether like Patrice was like a male name or a female name, but I kept going along with it. I was obviously just writing it out wrong. So Patricia, God, poor lady, I've got her name wrong. So I know, hopefully you've listened towards the end. Well, at the end of me talking there, it's not the end of the podcast. You've got more to come. But yeah, poor lady, Patricia Chaplin, that's her name. I've been saying it wrong the entire time. Anyway, she seems a real gem of an individual. I keep talking about this. Just really fascinating lady. And it does, I guess, another piece of people around the world, just sadly, like for money and power reasons, conspiring to sort of hide this sort of power and use it for their own benefit, which is incredibly sad. But I think that is changing because it's like not to say that I'm changing the world in one podcast, but I think, little things like this are gradually coming to the surface. Some of these aspects of these stories have come into the collective consciousness and people just having more of an idea of what's being done around the world without their knowledge. And I think there's one aspect to it, and how some of these earth-based technologies have been used against the rest of the population. So I think it's quite a profound understanding. And it just goes to show that there's a real deep level metaphysical forces at play in the earth and in the planet as a whole. If that makes sense, I don't think it does. Bit of a weird concoction of words. But yeah, overall, there was another anecdote I was going to squeeze in actually in the conclusion. And again, it's just another personal anecdote to do with portals. And I thought I'd just shoehorn this in quickly because I think it's quite pressing. It is quite a good story. But again, it was revolving, I guess, a lot of these like experiences when I was like really got quite awake and I was really into the idea of like UFOs and that kind of interaction between, trying to find myself as an individual, because I felt real resonance with a lot of these kind of UFO stories and the idea of beings on other planets and stuff, and some of the conspiring, the conspiracy theories kind of around that. So I was going on a real quest. So, Arthurian kind of idea. It's not just about, I've really been thinking quite deeply about that, because sometimes, you'll go away, you might go away for the weekend, you might stay in a nice hotel, city break, whatever, and just spend some time going to restaurants and museums and things. And similar to, going on holiday somewhere, it's just all about kind of relaxing, maybe absorbing culture. But some of these ideas of that real, like being a knight, you're going on a quest for kind of enlightenment and knowledge. And I'm really sort of viewing some of these trips that I did to these far-flung locations from the UK to particularly Americas, because there is such a culture, a huge culture of kind of this thing to do with like UFOs and spirituality there. I think it's a lot to do with the energies, and I think there are kind of a lot more real conscious people there as well. I think so that's why America's quite sort of important in the whole kind of story of the earth at the moment. But yeah, I think what I'm going to say, I think, what was I going to say? Yeah, I think I'm going to talk about these experiences like questing, because you'll go in there searching for knowledge and enlightenment. And I think when you go in with that conscious like remit, that conscious idea of like how this journey is going to unfold, then really interesting, special things do happen. And definitely that happened to me, because I remember, I think it was my second time booking to go to Contact in the Desert, which is probably one of the largest UFO conferences in the United States. I would say it's probably got a bit more corporate now, and I know there's been a lot of censorship in terms of like some of the people that speak there, and the people who used to speak there, and all being banned. So there's been a bit of strangeness with that And it used to be outside in the desert, and I find it a really exciting place to be. Then it moved to a hotel, and I think it sort of changed the atmosphere a little bit. It was convenient for me because my auntie literally lives about 10 minutes away from the hotel. So that was quite good. But the atmosphere changed, a lot of the content changed. But anyway, so it was like my second trip booking to go to Contact in the desert. And I think I was there for about a couple of weeks. And along with that, I wanted to go to ECETI, the Extraterrestrial Centre for what's it called? I can't remember. But anyway, it's headed up by James Gilliand, and he was speaking at Contact in the Desert, and this area in Portland, Oregon, basically, and there's an area called Mount Adams, this big mountain. And so James Gilliand, he was originally like a sort of, I think he's a facilitator for a whole range of spiritual stuff. He's done a lot of like Qigong, sort of more esoteric versions of Qigong. He's very big into sort of healing and what they call self-mastery. So he does courses to do with that. And he has like a spiritual healing center near to Mount Adams. And when he started building this center there, all these UFOs started to show up, and they were just flying into this mountain. So you can go there pretty much any night and you can see a huge range of activities. And it's just like, for me, it's like a guaranteed location. If you're skeptical about UFOs, go there and you'll see stuff, guaranteed. And it just doesn't matter what day it is, you'll see stuff in the sky, and it's all surrounding. That area is incredibly energetic. Really, really. I remember going there. I had long hair at the time, and there's a thing about me and my hair, like when it's really around really energetic people or really energetic place, everything gets very soft. My hair gets very, very soft. My beard gets very, very soft. And when I was there, like my hair was just like, woof, like just talking about electromagnetics, it just seemed to stand on end. And so, yeah, I just remember leading up before I flew to Contact in the Desert. It was one evening where I booked everything. I booked the tickets, I booked the flights, and I booked like the tickets to go to James Gilliand's ranch as well. And that night I went to bed and I woke up 3 a.m. and just had this kind of feeling that I wanted to look out the window. And as I looked out the window, there was a humongous light ship that just kind of went over the top of the house. And I just went out the front door in the street and just kind of watched this thing go. And it definitely wasn't a helicopter or a plane or anything like that. You know, it's just a very, very pronounced light ship. And then it happened again. I had an indication that I wanted to go outside and sort of look out the window, and there was another one. So it was just a very profound leading up to this trip, like indication that this trip was going to be quite special, and it was. And I went to Contact in the Desert, which was Palm Desert, and that went on for a few days. And then I got on a plane over to Oregon to the sort of Mount Adams Ranch, and I was having a bit of a hard time actually, because admittedly, because the energy's there, it just bring a lot of stuff up, a lot of emotional stuff up in your life. So there were some nights I was finding it quite difficult. And I was like going to see some of the night, but by this point I actually had quite a lot of interaction with the UFO. So I wasn't as in awe as I usually would do. I was still impressed by all the UFOs, but I was really just impressed by the actual landscape, the countryside. And I spent a lot of time kind of walking around Mount Adams because I really wanted to get kind of close to the mountain itself. And I did various kind of trails around there. I think, was it the first time? The first time I went walking to Mount Adams, I kind of drove there and I was very, very naughty. And I was driving through this Indian reservation, which I shouldn't have done. And I kind of parked up and then I started to walk. And I thought, if I keep to this river, I keep walking, I can't get lost, because America is very different to the UK. You can get this is like proper wilderness. The UK just don't get that. I mean, you never get lost, and unless you go up some kind of the mountains, people die up there. But it's very, very rare for people to get lost in the wilderness because there isn't really a huge range of it, to be honest with you. But America is a very, very different story. But I had this amazing walk. But I think because I sort of bowled in there and I went Indian reservation, I think the elementals of the area just really started to fuck with me. And so I got completely lost, and it actually was a little bit terrifying. So even though I just followed the river, I still managed to get completely lost, and it was quite a scary experience because I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to get back. But I managed to find my way in the end. But the second time I took a different trail. I drove there and I sort of parked up, and this track was more went directly up the mountain. And I just remember the energies were just so potent. I got as far as I could walk, because actually as you get to the top, it started to get more and more snowy. There's a lot more snow around there. And I didn't have the equipment to sort of deal with snow in terms of like snow boots and stuff. So at a certain point, I just couldn't go any further. And so it kind of decided to head back. But there was such an energy about this place. And this is the aspect of the story I wanted to say, where like I just came off the mountain singing. I was in such an elated mood. It was just, yeah, really strange. I was like singing and dancing. I was just in a great mood. And there's just something going on about that mountain. And there's been lots of kind of, I think remote viewers kind of remote viewed this mountain and actually say it's actually some weird kind of holographic projection, because when you see these light ships, when you see these UFOs, a lot of them just seem to kind of go into the mountain and sort of disappear. And there's been lots of documented video evidence of like the mountain just lighting up just randomly as well. Like when they have like kind of night vision glasses and stuff, you can kind of see the whole mountain glowing on one side. So it's just loads of really strange activity. So it could be very different to these mountains like, Montserrat or, Canigo that we just talked about, Catalan, where these are actually physical mountains. But this could be very, very strange, like high level. I mean, it sounds mad. Some people are going to disagree with this, but like some kind of multi-dimensional like projection where it looks like a mountain, but it actually isn't. There's kind of an aspect to it where you've got some non-human intelligence inside, and that does really resonate to me. And just because of the energies there, I just came off that mountain singing. So it's just another aspect of mountains being incredibly spiritual, incredibly like strange with their energies, and just so much strange activities around that area. And it's not just UFOs and orbs, it's also they have a lot of spiritual visitations from like higher ascended masters, and also a lot of Bigfoot activity as well. I didn't see Bigfoot while I was there, but there's a lot going on around there. So yeah, I just thought I'd bring that into the mix, just a little anecdote. Just my own, another sort of personal experience of interacting with some very, very strange mountain energies. And I know there's been lots of stories about kind of weird caves suddenly opening up on the side of the mountain to Mount Adams and then closing up like a few days later. And a lot of people say, why don't you just go up there and just check it out? But actually when you get there, because when you stood at a distance, it doesn't look like that far away. But when you get close to it, the typography is really difficult. Like that first walk where I got lost due to the elementals playing tricks on me, the rocks towards the base of the mountain are really hard to sort of get over these huge boulders. And so you think you kind of get close to it, you still realize there's still quite far to go. And it's very, very, very tricky terrain. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to go there, because I wanted to check out for myself to make sure, what the lay of the land is. And it's just to me, it just felt more and more genuine that those places have very special activity, and all this activity is genuine. It's not kind of put on for show. It's a real thing, a real phenomenon. So that's my Mount Adams story. So yeah, I recommend, if you are a little bit skeptical about UFOs and the idea, go there. That's a guaranteed location where you definitely will see it, and you can go there. You can camp, and they have places you can stay yourself as well. And you don't necessarily need to go for any particular event. You can just go there to enjoy the sky watching and stuff. And I think it's open the majority of spring and the summer. It closes in the winter because the conditions are quite bad. But as ever, as always, as usual, thank you so much for joining me. You can kind of catch this podcast, obviously, in all podcast platforms. It's on YouTube, it's on Rumble, it's on BitChute. There's my website, reconsidersimon.com. I sort of post up, probably every month now. I think I'm posting up like journal articles occasionally and stuff. And there's a lot of things that have been going on. Oh my God. So much I have to talk about in the future. Very interesting. It ties a lot that's been going on with me. So I'm just trying to decompress and just figure out everything. At some point I'm going to talk about it either in a podcast or do a video. But yeah, 2025 is turning out to be quite an interesting year. I've just been so many things, very challenging things, but also very beautiful at the same time. So definitely stick with me. There's going to be some quite interesting content to come when I have the time to make it. But yeah, I'm going to leave you now. I'm going to then fade over to the lovely Simon, which is me. And I'm going to be talking about feeling energy. And this is a video that's featured on my YouTube channel and again on Rumble or BitChute. And so, yeah, if you want to watch all the visuals or lovely pictures, go over to there. But if you're just quite happy to listen to the audio, I'm going to transfer to him now. And yeah, it's just all about my ability now to feel energy. And that, again, what I was talking about, all of this, my abilities is really ramping up. And there's been some incredibly huge progress in terms of my own healing and just being able to sort of like discover sort of the mechanics and the spiritual mechanics of my own body and actually what I'm able to do. And it's all very exciting and very, very woo-woo and very, very weird. Anyway, more to come on that, and I will pass over to myself. Take care. Bye. It's a common theme you may sometimes hear across various online spiritual communities of the upgrading of humanity and its abilities. From my point of view, I can communicate maybe first-hand evidence due to my own very real personal experience of the increased capacity to feel higher levels of energy remotely and purely through concentration. The unfoldment of this was the surprising function of actually being able to feel into the energy of things. Cities, countries, dates, years, stars, planets, governments, books, mountains, websites, buildings, companies, religions, AI, abstract concepts. It really can be anything. It seems to be able to traverse through time and space easily, even in connecting with dead relatives, pets, past lives. But there are some concepts that may be too big to feel into. Possibly. I'll get to that later. Before I go on, it's important to point out the results of this thought and feeling experiments are entirely running through me. So I could be giving a distorted result or results skewed to fit my worldview. Absolutely, this is a possibility, and the same when dealing with information from anyone else. Viewing a proper traditional paper unfolding map, remember those kids? In the UK, they are known predominantly as OS maps. Extraordinarily, I found a name or a place can catch my eye on the map. This then immediately creates a connection. It ignites something, sparking a flow of energy, either activating my heart or root or even sacral areas. Just the act of concentration moves the energy along on the map. I have no idea why, but this was the feeling and experience. There are so many ways to describe a place or concept. Its shape, its form, temperature, surroundings, the smell. But a feel of the overall energy is a very new concept to me. Gradually, I've been experimenting with what is possible within these realms. This could be a very controversial one. Long-standing religious and other spiritual constructs, without doubt, have structured society and morality worldwide. The term God can be shared with the majority of Abrahamic religions, or even people who are spiritual but don't follow any particular orthodoxy. So what does that feel like? The all-knowing, loving being, or almighty source of all creation? Well, I was surprised. I felt zero, nothing. It feels like a big void. Is this a limitation of language? Am I not using the correct name? Or is it because the concept is too big to feel into? Possibly. Controversially, this is the same for the word Jesus. It's a void, there's nothing there. Surprisingly, I thought even the energy egregore produced by people all around the world would manifest at least something. But returning back to the idea of language, if I feel into the word Yeshua, which is the original Hebrew or Aramaic name, it connects. My heart connects to a certain degree. But along with it, I experience pressure in the head. Currently, I'm defining pressure in the head as maybe distortions or interference of some kind. It's not really a pleasant feeling, but admittedly, this definition could change as I learn more. Interestingly, this is the same for other religious figures. Prophet Muhammad, even Buddha, which is arguably a spiritual ethos and doesn't center around a deity and is more about personal development and spiritual enlightenment. Feeling into both figures, there was a certain heart connection, not strong, but alas, with the same accompanying head interference. But the experimentation with the words God and Jesus was a real surprise to me and very unexpected. For me, source energy, creator energy, is heavily emitted from the sun. My own belief system also views creator energy flowing all around us. For me, it's evident in nature. We're saturated in it. I even think we're small fragments of it. I don't see its location being in one singular entity or dimensional location. The sun, our sun, that provides life could be viewed as a type of portal. Many point towards a surface being constituted of powerful plasma energies with a very central dark void, and not actually a burning nuclear furnace as commonly described. The power of love I feel when connecting into the sun, for me, is incredible, potent. There are supposed to be larger solar bodies, which also interface with our reality and biological life, although these are not recognised mainstream concepts, but more metaphysical. So I wanted to confirm and connect, find out for myself. The central galactic sun, for instance, as we rotate around the sun, the vague idea is that our solar system and others supposedly pivot around the central galactic sun. Upon connecting in deeply with this powerful body, feels even more seismic. Large areas of my body are activated in vibration and feeling, so much stronger and vast than our neighbouring sun. But can we go bigger, stronger? Someone recently mentioned to me the megagalactic sun, which I don't really have a grasp on the mechanics and how it operates, but as I found out, was even more powerful in its full body vibration, feeling, and heart-centered love. Each solar body, hierarchically, seems to become more and more powerful. Towards the beginning of the year 2025, I tried to feel into the preceding months ahead. Immediately, I felt undoubtable pressure in the head. Around May time, things slacked off a bit, but as the months progressed and went on in 2025, the pressure in my head rapidly increased, to the point that by November of this year, I was literally experiencing a very painful headache. So November, does this climactic feeling correlate to a very difficult month for the collective? But in contrast, 2026, things completely relax and ease off very quickly, with feelings of love. This really caught me by surprise. So how does this tie into aspects of the future? I might in some way address this at a later date. 2026 feels like something very seismic, potentially spiritual is occurring, which I'm still trying to figure out. I've been coming across information concerning mountains or hills acting as a form of portal. This is reflected in many different traditions, from Celtic lore, Taoism, Hinduism, and even the Incas. Climbing a mountain can be a rewarding yet challenging experience, a mixture of stress, fear, elation, achievement. For me, it can be a mini spiritual experience in its own right. But how do they feel energetically? I decided to look into some of the mountains I've actually climbed in the UK. Snowdonia in Wales, Ben More on the Isle of Mull in Scotland, and finally Ben Nevis, also again in Scotland. All of them, apart from Snowdonia, felt really nice. The love was flowing, my heart sang. It felt very profound. Alas, Snowdonia didn't feel good at all. Stress, sadness. After asking for permission, all I thought I could do was to connect up Snowdonia with the centre of the earth. Surprisingly, upon revisiting the next day, it felt so much better. The love and energy was flowing again. Whether this naturally realigned itself or I helped in some way, I'm unsure. So what of the cities around the world that many of us have lived in for a time or still in fact call home? For me now, I find it very challenging to live in cities. I spent 8 years in London, and energetically feeling into it now, the pressure in my head was very prominent, with alas no feeling in my heart at all. I went on to test Paris, New York, Edinburgh, Tokyo. A similar feeling was reflected energetically similar to London. Maybe some were less dense and built up and slightly more open, so as a result, there was less of a constrictive feeling in my head. Interestingly, Los Angeles, I know many will be surprised, I found a lot of heart-centered love resonance and expansion. To me, it makes sense why Hollywood is situated where it is, to cast a spell on the masses, harnessing those direct energies. The times I have visited Los Angeles in the States The energy I have found to be very potent. Could this be a combination of the desert, which I've always found to be highly spiritual, in combination with the energetic primary or yin underground desert spring water? Additionally, I found the same beneficial heart-centered feeling in relation to Australian cities like Sydney and Melbourne. I know those cities in particular were heavily affected by government lockdowns. It does make you think. On more galactic matters, the night sky when you have the opportunity to look is a mesmerising, captivating experience. I'm a firm believer that death is not the end, and we all move on to other experiences after passing over. For me, this doesn't just play out on an earthly plane, but on more of a complex galactic and dimensional level. So in relation to the star's energy reading could be more of a personal take on the star's energy based off my own reincarnational journeys. One time, I had a very mystical experience, one of my very first in the land of feelings and soul remembrance. I was exploring the ideas of my journey through the stars, and I came across the star Vega in the Lyran constellation. I suddenly experienced a huge wave of remembrance, of deep, deep sadness and longing. It was very sad, a very powerful feeling, something that still deeply affects me if I feel into it now. It's so sadly overwhelming. I could think of dead family members, lost pets, romantic breakdowns. Nothing really compares to this. Muscle testing into the reason why is a combination of a soul's recognition, deeply missing the experience around that star, and also the fact that whatever I experienced is no longer there. It's like it's been destroyed. It's a feeling of so much loss and sadness. This is something I intend to explore more because it really is a scar on my heart if I dwell on it. It feels like I really need to find some way of releasing it. More happier emotions come up when feeling into stars like Andromeda and Sirius. They feel very pleasant. The same is true for various suns in Centaurus constellation region. They really connect with my heart in a very light, positive, fizzy way. Closer to home in our local solar system, feeling sequentially into the various planets all the way to Pluto, some of the more energetic planets that really deeply connect were Venus, Earth obviously, Saturn, Uranus, and again Pluto. Pluto is very surprising to me, and what I felt went pretty deep. Could this mean I'm feeling into energy currents of this planet, or is it linked to a more sophisticated life or consciousness that inhabits the surface? Currently, due to the influence of Elon Musk and previous decades with NASA, Mars dominates our cultural focus when we think of other planets. When I feel into it, it feels very barren, devoid of any feeling really. I know there is an abundance of information concerning lost civilizations and even secret space programs already with well-established bases on Mars. Maybe this is why it feels so dull, because the energy of the activity and the people involved is so subpar to what it could be. DNA is seen as the building blocks of life. Many in the spiritual circles talk of the healing and upgrading of DNA. Previously, it's always been a very abstract concept to me. Recently, I've been very involved in meditating on the idea of the internal self or core self, the divine self, in a way the true template of our original expression. Feeling into these concepts has been a very powerful experience, amazing in many aspects. Linked to the concept of eternal self is eternal DNA. Roughly, a very high level of your authentic state can be expressed through the eternal DNA. But the proof is in the pudding. Upon feeling into these concepts, from my own point of view, they both feel very real. The difference between the human DNA expression and the eternal is very seismic. Eternal DNA is stunningly complex with an all-encompassing explosion of energy, love and feeling. The human DNA, unfortunately, was a big jump down in the energy experience. So how has this happened to me? I would say it's a combination of things. My body is probably now much less laden with toxicity, which, without a doubt, can cut off people from the more etheric side of realities that surrounds us due to the burden of chemicals and heavy metals in the body. Over the last 8 to 10 years, I've meditated regularly. Certainly over these last couple of years, in combination with meditation classes, uncovering plasma and elemental layers latent within the body has played a dominant part in the process. Healing of trauma, shadow aspects has helped also to make space in my life and body. Plus it's being activated and harnessed through a range of spiritual movement-based practices like yoga, qigong. These are all powerful teachings that can help unblock and spark things to flow more easily. That's my own internal work, but let's not also forget the wider collective. All of us in certain ways have elevated each other. This also plays a vital role. Along with the ever-present all-encompassing complex array of energies permeating our reality from celestial objects like the sun, planets, stars, and the overall cosmos, let alone constructs within our reality that we still can't articulate or conceptualize, which could be influencing and guiding. All of these deeper, more cosmic energies, in my opinion, are helping to purge the human spirit and physical vessel to a more embodied, authentic life ahead. Everyone has the ability to feel energy. Even the most closed off of people can feel bad atmospheres, or in contrast, places that energize and uplift the soul. My first glimmers of palpably being affected by energy was visiting Glastonbury Festival for the first time way back in the late 90s. I was stood right in front of the pyramid stage, feeling something very profound. Later on, I came to understand how potent Glastonbury is to me. Returning back to Glastonbury town many years later, and now more spiritually orientated, I was struck just how much my heart sank. This same feeling of tingling love has happened many other occasions, in random fields or on top of hills. It's occurred in a real diverse range of locations, in places I hadn't expected. This aspect of the ability is still a slight mystery to me. What does this feeling relate to? Sometimes again, it could be past life connected, an unconscious resonance. Via divination, I've posed this question for clarity, and it alluded on certain occasions to a link towards potential portals. Portals to what and where? I'm unclear. Over last year in 2024, the ability to feel into a place or person has really increased significantly. Previous years, I think it's always been there to a limited degree, but I've strangely never explored it deep enough. 2025 has been a dominant focus to my work and spiritual activities. It's really opened up a very large range of possibilities in terms of what is possible. This may be old hat to some people out there, but for me, the unfoldment of this process has been very exciting and expansive. I'm keen to really learn more. When feeling into things, I've considered there must be an underlying language or communication operating in the way different aspects of the energy hit within the body. As an example, when connecting with the moon, why am I feeling love and sensations at the back of my mouth? What does that correlate to? When connecting with things or concepts that make my heart sing, just like a fingerprint, it feels very unique and hits the heart very differently sometimes. Maybe from the top or to the sides. Again, is there a map to this? Or am I trying to impose a logic-based system with restrictive thinking that operates far beyond our 3D reality? Thanks so much for watching or listening to this journey through energy. Take care now. Bye bye.